stiffen the broad mandate, it's really up to the commissioners to decide just how much they want to push the issue of policing. I'd like to ask you about allegations you're practicing medicine without a license. Connie Walker, CBC News, Toronto.
A small sample of a very large body of work from the CBC's Connie Walker. She started as an intern at CBC 17 years ago. If you haven't seen her reporting here on CBC News Network or on the National, then you've heard her on CBC Radio, hosting The Current or World Report. And her work is one reason why Connie is being honored today as a woman of distinction by the YWCA, and Connie Walker is with me now. So first of all, congratulations to you winning this Women of Distinction Award. Can you tell us what this means to you?
Thank you. It's incredibly humbling. I mean, there is the group that I'm being awarded with tonight is an incredible group of diverse women from diverse communities across Toronto. So I do want to point out, though, that I am, just one part of a really amazing team at CBC of Indigenous reporters and producers who are doing the same kind of work and pushing to improve our coverage on Indigenous issues and trying to amplify Indigenous voices from across the country. So I'm honored to be getting the award, but I know there are a lot of people out there who deserve recognition as well.
Now, I understand that you have an interesting story to tell about how you first became inspired to become a journalist. So tell us about that.
It was actually in high school. I grew up in Saskatchewan on a reserve, and I went to school in a small town. And I remember it was I was in grade 11 when there was a very high-profile murder trial happening, and a young First Nations mother had been killed. Her name was Pamela George, and the two men who were on trial for her murder were two white university students from Regina. And I remember, just watching the coverage because I was in high school and just remarking on the fact that all of the attention seemed to be paid to these two men who were charged with her murder, that they were university students. They were described as good boys in the media. And I wondered if there were any Indigenous journalists in those newsrooms. And I ended up writing something for the local paper. But I feel like, that was the first time I really thought about becoming a journalist and what it would mean to try to better represent our communities and our people in mainstream media and mainstream news. And that's, that's how I got here, I guess.
And we're happy you're here. I want to ask you about your personal experiences and how they've helped you as a journalist. But before I do, I want to play something from an essay that you did for CBC. Oh, is this a surprise? Good. All right, let's watch.
I know I couldn't have the career I have in Toronto on the reserve, or even in Saskatchewan. But I've always said that my family is the most important thing to me, and choosing to live away from them is really hard. I mean, this is where I'm from, and this is where my family is.
So how did growing up on the reserve inform who you are today?
Well, it informed everything about who I am today, and it informs everything about what I do today, even though I'm no longer there. All of my family still lives in Saskatchewan. Most of them still live on the reserve. And so when we're talking about these issues, about Indigenous issues, when we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, or the legacies of residential school, or boil water advisories, or housing, like those are issues that I've had personal experience with and that my family is still living and dealing with. So I feel like those are things that are still continuing to inform what it is I do and what it is that I'm passionate about and motivated about. And I think that part of it is also like that particular piece that we did. That was kind of inspired by a question that I got from somebody when I moved to Toronto who said, why would anyone want to go to a reserve? Like, why would you ever want to live there? And I remember feeling like there's obviously these important stories that make the news about some of those issues that I just mentioned, but there's also a whole other side. There's a beautiful family and a beautiful community and this celebration of culture and strength and resilience, and I wanted to be part of helping to tell those stories in mainstream media as well.
So as one of the founding members of CBC's Indigenous unit, what are some of the stories that you think Canadians should be paying attention to right now?
Well, obviously this week it's the issue of cultural appropriation and what that means for Indigenous people in particular. And I think it's also evolved into a conversation about representation in the media and who is telling stories about Indigenous people and who is what responsibilities come with that. And, you know, what responsibilities we have as journalists to ensure that we're representing the communities that we are serving in our own newsrooms. And I think that, you know, that a lot has improved since I started at CBC in 2000. But, you know, this week has shown that there is, you know, always room for improvement, and that there's a long way to go.
And how do you think, you know, the focus on a digital medium, how do you think that has changed the playing field when it comes to covering some of these stories? Has it, in a way, opened up?
I think it was a game. It was a game changer, really, because I think that what was working against better coverage before was accessibility, and so now you have, you know, we all have access to social media and to Indigenous people in a way that we've just never been able to reach before. But it's also helped, I think, you know, convince people in newsrooms that these are important stories to Canadians, and because now, you know, we're not relying on traditional broadcast platforms where we put something out there and we might get an email back, we might get a letter. Now we can actually measure. We publish a story in the morning. We know exactly how many people have looked at it. We know how widely it's been shared. And I think that everybody, not just CBC, is recognizing that there's a large audience that's interested in Indigenous issues and Indigenous stories, and that these are important to all Canadians.
Connie, great talking to you today, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
And that's the CBC's Connie Walker with me in studio. A reminder, she receives her tribute tonight in Toronto.